agree with me that your product should not be used where there is
Nestle promises you a good
impure
food
water.
life.
Nestle collects millions
Around
of
1 in 4
gallons.
children are engaged in child labour.
The world's biggest food company, Nestle.
Nestle
impure
company
water.
Nestle collects millions of gallons a year from springs in Southern California. Nestle collects millions
to
of
look
gallons
into
a
the
year from
marketing
springs in
practices of
Southern
the baby milk
California.
industry.
Nestle promises
Nestle
you good
was one of the
easy
few
life.
feel that you have any
selling you
responsibility.
unhealthy
We can't have that
products.
responsibility, sir.
Nestle and Nestle.
Nestle.
Every giant company in the world has a sinister side that harms people or the planet, but quite few people have access to such information, and Nestle is not far from that story, since it has been guilty of a various number of reasons than you can imagine, including child labor, killing babies in Africa, water scarcity, and dozens of others. But chill, this is not how this video begins. We basically live in the most abundant times known to mankind. Whereas in the past, our ancestors had to spend most of their times working tirelessly for food, today we're just a click away from a variety of delicious things. But that's just another story. For now, let's talk about Nestle. The year is 1866, and two businessmen on opposite sides of Switzerland were just getting ready to start their own companies. In one side, Charles Page, a former US consul who fell in love with Switzerland's green meadows and fed cows, had this dream of building a condensed milk factory, hoping to emulate the success of the first factory of its kind, built 10 years earlier by Gil Bowden in the US. Charles had already sent his brother George to Gil's factory to try to learn more about his method, which involved evaporating water from milk and adding sugar. After that, together the brothers founded the Anglo-Swiss Condensed Milk Company, with the hope of becoming the main supplier of canned milk to the British Empire. However, 100 miles away from the Page brothers lived Henry Nestle, a German immigrant with equal fervent passion for dairy. Henry was one of the children of a list of 14 siblings, and for some reason, which by the way was noble, he was painfully aware of the high infant mortality rate across Europe, and in order to help solve this huge and daunting problem, Henry decided to develop a formula that could help overcome this problem, and spent several years trying to create an affordable breast milk substitute, combining milk with grains and sugar. And as surprising as it may seem, he did it, or at least, that's what we think. While in one hand, Henry made pennies selling his infant formula in Western Europe, in the other hand, the Page brothers made a fortune selling their condensed milk all over the world, and eventually became the main supplier to the British Empire. Finally, their dream had become reality. And things only got better in 1877. They went on to supply their products to the US and continental Europe. And since more money is always perfect, to further expand their business, the Page brothers began selling their own infant formula. Now, for Henry Nestle, this was a pure declaration of war, so he quickly launched his brand, Nestle Condensed Milk, in retaliation, starting a relentless price war that would last for nearly 30 years. Now, although both companies grew a lot during this period, the competition that the two practiced to each other massively destroyed their results. However, in 1905, when the three died, the directors of the two companies agreed to merge the companies, and that brought upon all the massive growth of Nestle we have seen to these days. And that's the beautiful story that probably everyone knows about Nestle. But behind the perfect show and the seemingly perfect story, there is much more hidden on the other side of the curtains. Just like most of the giants of the industry, Nestle did not have its story marked by sweets and chocolate as its advertisements presents.
Sweet dreams you can't resist. NESTLES. A dream as sweet as this. NESTLES. Creamy white, dreamy white. Nestle makes the very best. NESTLES. Sweet dreams you can't resist.
In fact, Nestle has had a bad story even since its inception. Now, just for the sake of refreshing your memory, let's do a little rewind to remember how exactly Nestle was born. Henry was one of the children of a list of 14 siblings, and for some reason, which by the way was noble, he was painfully aware of the high infant mortality rate across Europe. And in order to help solve this huge and daunting problem, Henry decided to develop a formula that could help overcome this problem, and spent several years trying to create an affordable breast milk substitute, combining milk with grains and sugar. And as surprising as it may seem, he did it. Or at least, that's what we think. Now, here we go. It's the 90s and we're facing a sad story about poverty, breastfeeding, and greed. Nestle has aggressively pushed its formula into less economically developed countries, precisely targeting the poor regions of Africa. The plan was simple. They made it sound like their formula was almost as good as breastfeeding milk, which is highly unethical as well as false for a number of reasons, but let's skip those reasons. Instead, let's move into a short story. You're a woman, or perhaps a man, and you just had a baby. You come home, feed the baby, play with him, say some gibberish, but somehow the baby seems dissatisfied. Then you breastfeed him again and repeat the cycle. The cycle becomes so repetitive that you end up noticing that something is quite wrong here. After some research, you discover that you have problems with the production of breast milk. And if there's no solution, you run the risk of losing your baby, which of course is not something good. What do I do now? You ask yourself. As you walk through the streets, you come across a huge poster or banner with the following information. Now, I'll try to read it slow just to make sure I don't swallow up any words. Don't wait too long before you wound the baby. If you do, the little one is likely to get weak and anemic. Mother's milk is of course the best food for young babies, but the time comes when it is insufficient for the fast-growing body. Doctors say that this is when the baby is about 6 months old. That's the time to begin using Nestle's food, because Nestle is so like mother's milk that the tiny stomach won't even notice the difference. Now, here is where the dirty begins. If you are like me who doesn't pay any attention to the details, you might look at it as just another useful information and quickly run to a store for buying a giant can of Nestle. But don't go so fast, as I'm about to show you some actions portrayed by Nestle to sell their products that might scare you out of your mind. The dirty side of Nestle starts with this basic principle. If you want to make a hell lot of money on sales, you need more people buying your products or services. Selling only to mothers who can't produce breast milk wasn't going to make them rich, since it's just a small group of women. They needed every single woman buying it. So now the question is, how to get mothers to feed their babies a synthetic milk, even though they produce breast milk normally? The answer is quite short: by creating a huge necessity where there's not. Now, scroll back some seconds and pay close attention to the banner you read while walking on the streets. Now, paying a little bit of attention, the poster actually says, "Don't wait too long before you win the baby. Mother's milk is of course the best food for young babies, but the time comes when it is insufficient for the fast-growing body. Doctors say that's the time to begin using Nestle's food." And done, you were hooked. In fact, every single mother was just hooked. Every single mom wants to see their babies growing fat and healthy, and Nestle is the only one that can help. That's what the doctor says, isn't it? You need to buy Nestle formula if you want to see your baby shining and healed, isn't it? Except that you don't. That's just the strategy they use to create a huge necessity where there's not. Now, here's why Nestle's strategy for promoting their synthetic milk was so dirty. Back in the 90s, when cigarettes were just emerging in our society, the propaganda was simple. Have a lot of doctors holding cigarettes in magazine front pages, big banners, television ads, and eventually, everyone around will start smoking. And the reason for this psychology effect is pretty simple. Who do we look at when the subject is looking cool or sexy? Social media influencers, or back in time, artists and celebrities. Now, guess who do we look at when the subject is being healthy or having healthy routines? The doctors and athletes. Not this doctor, but this one. Now, guess what happens if a doctor appears on big banners, front pages, and everywhere around holding cigarettes? Chances are that everyone around will copy the example. And that's the propaganda Nestle has picked to promote their synthetic milk. In order to replace the breast milk, Nestle paid doctors to promote information such as the one on the banner you read while walking on the streets. And since the plan was to get every single mother to stop breastfeeding their babies, all they had to do was to get doctors to tell the mothers about the benefits of using Nestle Nestle's formula. Now, don't think that the mothers were dumb. The fact is that the promises were really good. They promised things such as highly nutritive values, lots of vitamins, which of course the babies wouldn't find on a breast milk. And while you might be thinking that this was all, well, you're wrong. In some continents like Africa, Nestle hired saleswomen, dressed them up like nurses, and sent them to hospitals to offer some advices to new mothers about their formulas. And after selling lots of fantasies, they offered some free samples so that the mother will try out by themselves. And they made sure that the samples were just big enough that by the time they ran out, these mothers would have stopped producing breast milk naturally, forcing them to go and buy new samples for months and months and months. And just like that, Nestle was able to generate a hell lot of money. And if you think that the evils end up here, well, once again, you're wrong. Nestle's dark stories are way bigger than you can imagine. Remember the less economically developed countries of Africa where Nestle used to promote their heavenly safe formula? Well, in these poor regions of Africa, thousands of mothers lost their babies due to diarrhea, provoked by, guess who? Nestle's milk. Because of lack of literacy, moms in these poor countries didn't know about the necessity of boiling the water first before blending it with the formula. And so, they will just blend it with available water, which of course was far from clean. But don't think that Nestle was the guilty for that. Of course not. Nestle made sure that the information was present in the bottle label. The only thing was that it was written in international language. Now, for some people who barely can read in local language, can you imagine how impossible it might be to read in foreign language? Couldn't the saleswoman dressed in nurses give such information to the moms? Well, Nestle was indeed heavenly, since thousands of innocent babies in Africa lost their lives. But wasn't just a bit safe. But this was just one of the water problems from Nestle, especially dedicated to poor regions of Africa. Now, what about the other regions? Well, some other countries were also facing water problems caused by Nestle. Aside from food and more recently internet, what's the number one thing people need to survive? I'm pretty sure you probably answered money, but no, it's not money. I'm speaking about water. This seemingly unlimited transparent liquid might seem unnecessary for you since you had the luck of being born in a place where it is abundant. But put in a place where water lacks, you might feel how important water is for human existence. This example follows the basic rules of humanity. We only give value to things when we no longer have it. Now, tap water or any water that comes out of our homes might be pretty inexpensive and easy to get, but bottle that same water, give you a name, and you have an unlimited source of easy and cheap money. That's precisely what Nestle has been doing for years long, in some countries like Pakistan, Nigeria, and even the US.
For one tanker load, Nestle pays $10. Once bottled, the same water costs $50,000.
In his own words, Nestle's CEO assumes that the human right to water is quite an extreme solution. For him, water is a foodstuff like any other and should have market value, and privatization is the best way of doing so.
Also Wasser ist natürlich das wichtigste Rohmaterial, das wir heute noch auf der Welt haben. Es geht darum, ob wir das normale Wasserversorgung der Bevölkerung privatisieren oder nicht. Und da gibt es zwei verschiedene Anschauungen. Die eine Anschauung, extrem würde ich sagen, wird von einigen von den NGOs vertreten, die darauf pochen, dass Wasser zu einem öffentlichen Recht erklärt wird. Das heißt, als Mensch sollten Sie einfach Recht haben, um Wasser zu haben. Das ist die eine Extremlösung. Ja? Und die andere, die sagt, Wasser ist ein Lebensmittel, so wie jedes andere Lebensmittel, sollte das einen Marktwert haben. Ich persönlich glaube, es ist besser, Man gibt einem Lebensmittel einen Wert, sodass wir alle bewusst sind, dass das etwas kostet, und dann anschließend versucht, dass man mehr spezifisch für diesen Teil der Bevölkerung, der keinen Zugang zu diesem Wasser hat, dass man dann dort etwas spezifischer eingreift, und da gibt es ja verschiedene Möglichkeiten. Also.
But for some reason, which we don't know what it is, after some time, this became his positioning.
Hello, I'm Peter Brabeck, the chairman of Nestle. There are apparently some misconceptions about my ideas on water. Let me make it clear from the beginning. I have always supported the human right to water. Everyone should have enough clean, safe water to meet their fundamental daily needs.
Now, again, while you might be thinking that this was the end of Nestle's dark and dirty story, well, you're painfully mistaken, but there is a problem. I totally forgot to mention right in the beginning of the video that this video will make part of the very first series I will be creating in the channel. So if you want to watch the last part of this series, make sure you subscribe to the channel and hit the notification bell so you don't miss the last part, which is coming soon enough. Until then, I hope you have a really great day, and I will see you in the next part. I mean, if you subscribe and turn on the bell. Now, make sure you double hit the dislike button and triple hit the like button. This will enable a secret menu on your YouTube app.